Well. All right.
Lovely.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Shadows and Secrets deep dive series. I am Samantha Skal.
And I'm Kerry Savage, and together we are Shadows and Secrets, a series of retreats and an online community for mystery, thriller, and horror authors.
You can find out more at shadowsandsecrets.com. So exciting.
It is. So we are both book coaches and authors, and we love talking about story. This is the 12th, 13th. I'm not
Mm,
sure if it's lucky
yeah.
13 this time. Might be. But as one in a number of our series of spoiler alert deep dives into scary books that we love, where we talk about twists, structure, masterful misdirection,
So hard to say.
villains, and anything else that strikes our fancy about MTS, which is the overarching genre term for mystery, thriller, and suspense. But first, I would like to introduce my co founder of Shadows and Secrets, Sam.
Hello, everybody. I am Sam, Samantha, if depending on how this shows up for you. And I love working with thriller, mystery, suspense, and horror authors to write and plan twisty novels. And I especially dig and find extreme joy in brainstorming twists and villains. And Carrie, tell the people about yourself.
All right. Thank you, Sam. I am also a writer and a book coach who loves working with writers to make their fictional ideas come to life. And I am super into immersive settings and details that really pull you into a book's world.
Excellent. And I can attest that Carrie is an excellent coach about all of those things. So yes. All right. So we are going to be giving away everything, including key plot points. If you have not read today's book, hit pause, go read it, and then come back.
So, seriously, there are no secrets left unturned here. So, consider this your final spoiler alert warning. The structure of these talks is going to be the same every time. We will read the book jacket copy and talk about what the author has done to manipulate us before we even start.
And then we're going to read the first page and what the author has done to manipulate us there.
And then we break down each of the major twists in terms of how the author did it, what percentage of the way through that it happened, and what on screen clues existed so that the twist worked.
And we're also going to talk about how the author accomplished the overall misdirection and manipulation of the reader, which is why we like to read MTS, and the way they use language or setting or other elements to set the reader up for maximum fear. Some books are scarier than others. This one is not quite as scary, depending on how scary you find murder. But this is why we read scary stuff.
Hell yeah. All right, are we ready to dive into this delightful romp? Maybe more
We
romp and
sure
less
are.
fear, which is just equally good. We love a romp.
We do love a romp. Okay, so today's book is The Retirement Plan by Sue Hincenbergs. Hopefully,
Ooh,
I am saying that right, Sue. Thank you so
very
much for
good.
writing this delightful romp of a story. I just want to show that the cover here says three wives wanting a new life, and then what is the other part of that, Carrie?
Three husbands in their way. Dun dun dun.
So,
Love it.
immediately we get an idea about what the book is about, which is
Hmm.
so fun. Um, so do you want to read the book jacket copy or should I?
Sure, yes. So this is from Amazon. Um, and I'm just going to cut out the blurb that she got from Nina Simon, which is also
Oh,
great. But in all caps, right across the top, they'd kill to be widows. Three best friends turn to murder to collect on their husbands' life insurance policies. But the husbands have a plan of their own in this darkly funny debut that will delight readers from the first laugh to the final twist. So a little bit of editorialization in there
yeah.
while they're setting us up. But then, after 30 years of friendship, Pam dreams of her perfect retirement with Nancy, Shalisa, Marlene, and their husbands, until their husbands pool their funds for an investment that goes terribly wrong. Suddenly, their golden years are looking as dreary as their marriages. But when the women discover their husbands have seven-figure life insurance policies, a new dream forms, and this time they need a hitman. Meanwhile, their husbands are working on their own secret retirement scheme, and when things begin to go sideways, they fear it's backfired. The husbands scramble to stay alive, but soon realize they may not be quick enough to outmaneuver their wives.
It's so good. So, uh, let's read. Well, what do we want to take away from that? I mean, I think that pretty beautifully sets up the premise of the book, and actually hearing that. So Carrie and I were talking before we started here about what we thought the actual story question was for this, because I think it could go any number of ways. It's like, will the husbands get away with what they're doing? Will the, like, will they get away with stealing all this money? Will they find their happy ever after, like on both sides? Will the wives find it? Will the husbands find it? The one I just thought of when you were talking was like, can you get away with murder? Maybe, but that's only after they decide to hire the hitman. And, there's a lot of conflicting stuff going on here, which makes it really fun,
Yes.
right? Like we have the wives who are like unhappy and find out that there's these life insurance policies that can solve the problems that they think they have, which is like our golden years have been taken away from us, right? And then you have the husbands who are like, we are stealing $10 million. Will we get away with that? And then there's everyone is hiring people to kill each other the entire time, which is, I mean, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's like it makes it hilarious in a dark way.
Yes.
Um, yeah, thoroughly enjoyed this book. It was and I yeah, anything to add about the book jacket copy and
Well, I think, in thinking through the things that we think about when we do these talks, one of them is what was the inciting incident. And I don't know that I would say that this is the inciting incident, but you could make an argument based on this book jacket copy that the inciting incident happens off screen because
yeah.
what it's pointing to in the book jacket copy is that investment that goes terribly wrong. And all of a
Oh,
sudden, all of their lives have been upended. But we only find out about that in chapter two, maybe, because she's setting us
yeah.
up a little bit. She shows us right away, like we're in Pam's point of view. Pam is one of the wives. I will make the argument that she is our protagonist. Sam may disagree.
One one assumes, right? Because she's the
Yes.
chapter that we open with. So like that's always going to be the assumption from the reader is like the person we meet in chapter one, not a prologue. And sometimes your prologue can be named, oh, whatever, but like chapter one, this person we're making the assumption is the person we're going to follow most closely to the story, the person we care the most about, whose side we're on. And Pam definitely has a lot of POV. So I that would be my assumption is that she is the protagonist.
It certainly sets us up, like all the things that you just said are all the things that point to this is the person who is guiding us through the story, right? But she does give us three other point of view characters. And even some moments like there was a moment in the very end where you get like a paragraph of Elmer. You're in Elmer, who is the delightful dog in
Yeah.
in this romp, where you're in Elmer's POV for a second, which I just made me smile. Um, but yeah, I think so. That is an argument for like that. We find that out as like not a throwaway line because obviously it's really important. It frames how we're coming into this story and how they're all looking at their relationships with each other.
Yeah.
That Hank had set up had this investment plan, brought all the other husbands in on it, said like, oh, it's a can't miss thing. And then of course, like a can't miss thing, it missed. And now Pam and Hank in particular, I don't think anybody else had to sell their house. But Pam tells us right away that like where they are living now is not, where they were living. Like when this investment went sideways, they had to sell their house. And that really changed their lives quite a bit.
That is an interesting thing. It's like in the inciting incident, if we assume that the inciting incident was investment went wrong, so Hank decided to start stealing money, which is what we learn has happened. That is his inciting incident. But, because Pam's our protagonist, her inciting incident, I think, is the decision to kill her husband to get his life insurance policy.
Yes,
Um,
I think in my notes, that's what I had as the proper inciting incident of the book. But it's just funny
yeah,
how you could make an argument for the
totally.
thing that happens off screen being an inciting incident for this thing
Yeah,
because it does set all of them on this path. It in it in oh gosh, I can't even remember the word. It altered all of their relationships with their husband.
right.
That messed with each one of these relationship dynamics and set them off to where we are right now when we meet them. So
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
think it's the inciting incident of the story, but you could sort of discuss it or frame it that way. So
Absolutely. Absolutely agreed. Okay. Shall we read the first page, which I can
yes,
do?
please. I think you
Okay.
should.
So this is chapter one. There is no prologue, titled You Don't Need That. Pam licked margarita salt from her lips, looked around her backyard table, and wondered which one of her friends would die first. Fabulous first line.
Yes,
Just
indeed.
chef's kiss.
Yep.
Not that she had a premonition exactly, she just tended to be a touch morbid that way. Plus, she'd already seen the three other couples' kids graduate and parents buried, so at this stage of their lives, it made sense the next event to pop up could be one of their own funerals. I'm going to keep editorializing here. I love how quickly we understand where she is in her life. And like we understand immediately this is a woman who has already had some life, has already seen some kids. Like we don't know exactly the age, but we're picturing like 60s
Yeah.
ish, like past kind of we're definitely not at the beginning where we're having children and like everyone's a baby, like it's
Kids
we've
have
done some
launched,
stuff.
parents have passed. That's usually, yeah,
Yeah.
late 50s, early 60s feels like the
Yeah.
spot for that.
And we know we're in a backyard. We know they're drinking. We know there's friends around. We're two sentences in, right? So in terms of like setting the stage and anchoring the reader, like excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going. As far as she could tell, any of the eight of them had an equal shot of cashing in their chips, though if she had any say who'd be first, she'd prefer it to be Andre.
Poor Andre.
Salty. Love it. Okay. She slapped a mosquito on her neck. Others buzzed the table's citronella candles and the twinkle lights strung around her patio, fighting crickets and Van Morrison for the lead in the dinner's soundtrack. On a steamy night like this, Pam and her girlfriend should have been floating in her saltwater pool and sipping cocktails with their husbands cracked open beers in the hot tub, but they'd had to sell that house. So another little anchor of like, we're feeling a little bit angry that we are not like, that things have changed. Pam studied Hank across the leftover burgers and corn on the cob. In the darkness, he was almost handsome again. The table's edge covered his pot belly, and the shadows hid his jowls. She searched for a glimpse of the man she'd married, but he was long gone. Sometimes she missed him. More great anchoring. Get us another round, will you, babe? He didn't get to call her that anymore, and she shot him a glare he didn't catch. She pushed herself up from the weathered cushion and grabbed four dripping cold ones from the cooler. Hank accepted his and in one motion twisted off the cap and tossed it in her hydrangeas. Larry, Andre, and Dave followed his lead, and Pam made a mental note to collect that trash in the morning. And that's kind of like the first page. So we have so much great anchoring in terms of how she's feeling about her husband, which I would say is not particularly flattering.
Nope.
Where they are, she's angry about what has happened. We don't know what's happened, why they had to sell the house, but we understand she wasn't thrilled about it. And we have we're getting to introduce all the characters, but what really matters is like, this is Pam's story. She's the one who's going to be experiencing it. And we are in for the ride, right? And particularly with the cover and the book jacket copy where we learn that she's going to hire a hitman to kill all of them. We're just like, we're in it, right? We're like, buckle up. Let's see where this takes us.
Well, and I think like there's on the second page, I think it is where the name of the chapter comes from Andre, who we're already a little like about because Pam said that like, oh, if one of them's gonna go, it's probably gonna, or it should be Andre or something like that. So
Yeah.
you're like, okay, why does she think that? And then we see Andre. I think it's in the first chapter. Yeah, it is because it's the name of the chapter.
Yeah.
Um, tell his wife that she should, who is not Pam, it's Shalisa, she shouldn't eat a piece of the chocolate cheesecake that she has made and brought to the dinner. He's like, oh, hun, you don't need that. It's like,
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, what? That and like him, like them all like throwing the bottle caps into the garden. Like, I just was immediately on Pam's side. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
these guys are jerks, quite
Right.
frankly.
Right. And from Pam's
So,
view, I mean, this is part of her pretty great arc. And I would say this also is not like a it's not a rom-com because they're already all married and they do come back to each other in the end, which you could argue maybe there's a bit of a romance like there is a romance subplot
I
here.
think so. Yeah. I mean,
Um
it's an unusual one, but yeah.
Yes, but they also decide to kill them.
Yeah.
And in order for us to get on board with that and not just consider Pam and her friends to be complete psychopaths, we have to understand why they're all so angry. And I think that all of these things are seen from Pam's perspective. We learn in the end that Andre doesn't want his wife to eat the chocolate because he has battled cancer and knows that like if we don't take care of yourself that this could come back to bite you. And so it's out of love. Certainly the delivery could use a little work maybe, but like from
Yeah,
Pam's
maybe. Yes.
perspective at this time for what she knows, like this makes perfect sense, right?
Yes, the fun thing about having the different POVs and the things that we learn as we learn more about these people is you completely understand how everybody is misinterpreting and misunderstanding each other, but that none of it. All right, I know this is going to sound also like yes, they're hiring a hitman. So like putting that aside as the fictional reason that we're here, there's reasons that they want their husbands dead. Like they're not actually treating their wives very well. They're not telling
Hmm.
them things. And that's part of where all of
Yeah.
this comes from. On the flip side, like yes, there's a lot that's going like why do you want your husbands dead? Like there's they may be going about it in 100% the wrong ways, but like what they are doing in many ways is out of love and wanting to
Yeah.
redeem themselves in their wives' eyes.
Yeah.
So it is just a big old mess in the
It is
best
a big old
way.
mess. And this leads us delightfully into your every deep dive reminder that thrillers, mystery, and suspense are simply the villain story. And the villain is up for toss up here, but it's the villain story as experienced by the protagonist. So if we're making the assumption that Pam is our protagonist, she's the one experiencing what is going on beneath the surface. And from her perspective, the husband's, like Hank particularly, is the villain.
Mhm,
And then we get the opposite, right? We have Hank's POV and we have our hitman Hector. And
mhm.
we have all these other people, and each of them has their own kind of antagonist. Hector doesn't re I mean, he has an antagonist in Hank's boss's hitman, like
Yes.
enforcer, but we don't really learn about that until much later, and that ends up being the person that Hector has to take down in order to save everyone, and it's very satisfying.
Yes.
But and twists are also just the reveal of an assumption. So
Mhm.
Pam is making a lot of assumptions here about what she understands about her husband and her husband's friends, and that they have failed them. They are assholes, right? Like they're not respecting her and her friends. Like there's all these things, and they're logical assumptions. So we're like, yeah, we're on board.
Yep.
Um, Okay, I just want to call out the last line of the first chapter because we have a bit of a writer choice that works well. So, um, honey, don't need that happens, as Carrie said, and everyone reacts, like the women react, the men are just like, what? And then watching, Pam sensed something shift in the night air. As she cleared the dishes, she looked around the table at her husband and the friends they'd made 3 decades ago and wondered again which one of them would die first. 2 days later, she knew.
Mm,
So the reason that's interesting is it's absolutely a valid choice that writers can make, but from the standpoint of what we thought as the reader, we thought we were entering this story with Pam to experience it as she experiences it. 2 days later, she knew, puts us in the standpoint of like, oh, Pam is looking back on this chapter. Which may or may not actually be true. I actually can't remember if we learn at some point she's looking back. I don't think she is. I think it's a little line that just sort of it lets us know that something's going to happen, and but it does pop us out of the story a little bit. So I think it's a little shift in POV that, makes us suspenseful. So,
well, I would say that Sue made some really interesting choices as a writer throughout. And I mean this in a good way too. Like I think there are different ways that you could have told this story, and
yeah.
incorporating the different POVs made it a different story in a really interesting way because we, as the readers, get to experience, like we have Hank's POV, we have Hector, the hitman's POV, and we have Padma, who is Hank's boss at the casino, all their POVs. And so what we as the reader know is we know pretty much everything that's happening. There are still some twisty surprises, which is wonderful. But we know, for instance, when, Hank is saying one thing and Pam is thinking it's another, we know what's actually going on in many cases.
Yeah.
But, it still works because we know that, like, well, Pam believes this and it's not true, but Hank is
Yeah.
thinking this, or like Hector is going to do this, or like what happens, at the very end with Brenda and Padma, and Padma's thinking one thing and Brenda knows something else, and like no one really knows where all the money's gone except we know where the money's gone because we've seen the
Right.
events unfold. So the reader ends up feeling kind of smart and having this eagle eye omniscient view, even though it's not told in omniscient POV, where we know a lot of the things and can see them unfolding. So the mystery for us, or the thing that's interesting and keeps us reading, is to see, like, well, how is this misunderstanding going to, we know it's the misunderstanding has happened, how is it going to get resolved? Or like, are they ever going to figure out like who was doing what and what people's motivations were? Are they going to get back together?
Yeah.
Is Hector going to actually kill these guys after all? Like, who's going to end up with the money? Like, there's lots of unanswered questions that keep you reading, but it's not, I would say, like traditional, like, or what we're used to in many ways.
Yeah, well, very well said and well observed. Agreed completely. Like I was very engaged with this story, just, once again, doesn't follow our, sort of what we think of as a good place to start if you're just, like if you're thinking about writing your very first mystery thriller, suspense, or, horror's a little different, so I'll just keep it at MTS, but it's like inciting incident is somewhere in 0 to 10%. That's why the reason the person enters the story, your protagonist enters the story, midpoint twist, climactic twist, and then final twist. And there's some other stuff that comes into that, but in this one, in the inciting incident, like the story question, I mean, okay, so let's talk about the inciting incident because
Okay.
this was one where we think it's fascinating. Um, so I looked at the percentages, and on Kindle this time it was actually pretty accurate. Like 0% was at chapter one because there wasn't a whole lot of other matter. So these percentages are like plus or minus 1%.
Oh, okay, great.
Um, so at 11%, the concept of offing their husbands comes up. It's after they learn that Dave, the first guy to die, and that's also a question. It's like you could argue that that's kind of an inciting incident, but there's no choice made. It's more just like this thing happened, and there's a lot of questions about like it's when we learn that Hank thinks that Dave was killed
Mm-hmm.
on purpose for the money laundering that they're doing. And so we're immediately like, what? Money laundering? Like, what's going on? And it's a great way to introduce that. But
Mhm.
again, that's in Hank's POV, and I would argue he is not our protagonist. It is Pam. So interesting.
True. I think the one, like I had Davis, like in chapter two, that's when we learned Dave is dead, right? Because Hank
Yeah,
calls Pam, and we're still in Pam's POV in chapter two. Hank calls her and is
yeah,
like, don't let Marlene, who is Dave's wife, don't let her come home. So I
right.
had inciting incident question mark because I think sometimes, and this is, you and I love talking about this kind of stuff, so we can keep debating. But there is a time I think where the inciting incident can be the thing that happens. It's not necessarily the choice that the person makes. Sometimes there is an additional beat before
Yeah,
the decision is made. Like sometimes they do come together. Like something happens and the person makes a choice. Sometimes there is a little bit of separation between those two, which is why sometimes it's hard to be like, oh yeah, this is it versus this is it.
okay. Yeah, so in this case,
It could
Dave,
be Dave dying. It 100% could also be, when they decide to, first start thinking about offing their husbands. Because
yeah,
that is the choice that they're making. And that is really, gosh, you could argue either one is what
you
sets them
could.
on their journey. Um, so I don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I look at it from the standpoint of like Dave dying, we learned that at the beginning of chapter two. I love it when we have a dead body in chapter one, which we basically do. And so, if we start that as like the start of the inciting incident, it just is spread out more. So it's like Dave had to die so that they could learn that there was a life insurance policy and then make the decision to go hire a hitman so that they can collect the life insurance policies. Like all of those things are very connected.
Yeah.
And I think I like that as the answer to what is the inciting incident. And also, like, that presents the story question to Carrie has a fabulous way of describing inciting incident and story question. Do you want to go into that just for 30 seconds?
Well, it's just that I think the inciting incident sort of presents your story question, right? Because it is setting out, like, here is the question that we're going to have to answer in the climactic moment. Ideally, that should be introduced in your inciting incident because it is the turning point in that journey, right? They can't go back. Things are never going to be the same. That's sort of a definition of what an inciting incident is. And so, like, that goes really nicely hand in hand with, like, okay, well, what is this journey? What are they setting out to solve or learn or figure out? And so, yeah, those two things should go together. Again, like, nothing is perfect in these story formulas that
Yeah,
we put forward, but generally speaking, it's a natural, they're naturally things that go together well. So, sorry, I don't feel like I didn't do a
agreed.
good job of explaining that,
No,
but
you did a fabulous job of explaining it. So if we go, if we're making the assumption that the inciting incident is starting with Dave dying and ending with Pam and her friends hiring hitman, the
mhm,
question then becomes like, will they succeed? Will they get the money? Will they get the money?
yeah. Will they
Um,
get the money? Will they is it like will they succeed in their retirement plan?
will they succeed? Yes.
To pick up on the title,
Great.
sorry, couldn't resist.
Great. So, and then of course the answer can be twisty, right? Because the assumption is that the money will come from the life insurance policies. We learn a little bit later that it will not come from the life insurance policies because there are no life insurance policies and they canceled them. And that is the moment that like breaks them, right? It's like, okay, well, we were already on board with killing our husbands and then we were kind of waffling about it. And now we're just like, no, we are into this.
Yeah. I mean, they have
Um,
that moment right before the knock on the door, which I think is right about at the midpoint twist turn moment where they're both Nancy and Pam are trying to convince like they want it off. They want to call it off. They've
mhm.
changed their minds until they find out about the insurance policies being canceled. And then they're back
Yeah.
on board and then they get a knock on the door. I think that's the order that it goes in. I could
Yeah, I
be
mean,
totally wrong.
so again, we're spoiling everything, right? So
Yeah.
they find out that Claire, Pam and Hank's daughter is pregnant at 44%, and
Mhm.
the juniper bush is gone from Shalisa's front yard, which she had been pissed about Andre about. They learn the guys are dead. This all happens at like 44%. So they want to call it off, and then they learn that the guys are dead. Um, we have some aftermath about the funerals and everything. They find the drama with Larry and Marlene. No, Marlene and Dave were the
No,
couple.
Marlene and Dave, Nancy and Larry.
Nancy and Larry.
Mhm.
The problem with their relationship was that Larry was not accepting their son for who he was, which is gay, and he's married to a man, and Larry had not been accepting of that. And Nancy was like, I'm leaving you because I want to support my son. So they find a letter that Larry wrote to the son at 48%. And then Hector, we learn, blew up their boat at 51%, which is expected. So that's kind of like, in terms of a midpoint from Pam's perspective, it's like we don't really have like it's a turn, right? Like they have achieved their goal of
Mhm.
killing their husbands. And so now things are really never going to go back to what they thought they were, what was going to happen. However, we find out at 57% that the dudes are alive. After Pam has quit her job and learned that the insurance policies were canceled. So like for Pam, things are doing this. It's like I wanted to stop this. I didn't. They're dead. My life is over. I now have no insurance policy and no husband because I had killed him.
Yeah.
And so it's doing this. They don't know that the dudes are alive until like well past the climactic scene, if memory serves. I'll look at that in a second.
No, it's
But
before the climax. I'm
is
pretty sure
it?
it's before the climactic scene, but it's there is a while. We do go
Oh,
through
you're
all that.
right. You're right. They
It's
find out through the email and
yes.
all
Yeah.
of that stuff. So, from Pam's perspective, things are bad. We learn that Hank and his friends, knew that the boat was going to be blown up. They faked their own deaths to get away from what they think is the Indian mob coming to kill them, the enforcers from the casino. Um, that's right. And then we have the whole thing with the mob coming and taking the dog as collateral, which of course, as does the dog die.com, I'm pretty sure this book would be in there. And the answer is no, the dog does not die. The dog is not harmed because
Elmer's
we
totally
we would
fine.
never.
Yep.
Um, and it was just kind of it's like an escalation and suspense from there, right? So we have from Hank's perspective, we learn that he thinks that they're being held hostage in Hector's mother's apartment, and it turns out, twist, because they were making a logical assumption, and it was proved wrong that they were not. They could have left
Yep.
any time, but they assume that they
Like it's like
are.
that was part of what you paid me for was to give you this guy who could help you translate and
Yeah.
whatever. And
And
like we
they
thought
thought he
if we tried
was,
to leave, he was going to shoot us.
yeah. Yeah. And in the meantime, through Hanks, we learn about what happened. We learn that Andre had cancer. We learn that he lied to his wife. We learn that, they're not doing a very good job of being super dead because they're realizing that they love their wives and like they learn that the wives were going to kill them. So they have their own emotional reaction to that, which makes sense. Lots of fun just back and forth, right? And again, the structure doesn't totally fit like our classic structure because the climactic scene is Hector confronting the Italian or the Indian mob boss Fareed at 85%. That's a classic like time. It is the
Timing was
climactic scene.
perfect. But
Yeah.
and yeah, I totally agree. It was the climactic scene, but it is not, usually it would be Pam that we would
It
be
would be Pam who
about the
confronts, and Pam
conversation.
is not a part of this confrontational climactic scene at all. It's Padma and it's Hector, and it's delightful. You
Hmm.
know, we have this whole thing where Hector kind of like swindles his way to get all the money, and there's like this extra 500K, and Padma's like, whatever, like my mom's not even going to care. She has her own beautiful emotional arc. Um, and so okay, so I labeled all the chapters I went through. So at 81%, we have Pam's point of view, or Fareed, the enforcer, comes
Hmm.
to collect. They take Elmer. So for Pam's, she's like, my God, they've taken everything from me. I've killed my husband for my choice,
Yep.
but I also know he's alive. Um, and they have left us, right? Like not only did they cancel the life insurance policies and fake their own deaths, they did it because they don't love us. So she's devastated.
Yeah.
Everything's just
Took
terrible.
off with $9 million and left us behind to
Exactly.
her and go through all the things. And now I have the Indian mob in my living room telling me they're going to kill me if I can't come up with the $10 million.
Right.
They don't even have
Which,
10 million, they have 9 million.
yeah. And so they, yeah. So, I mean, we see Pam at chapter 45,
Mm.
and then we don't see Pam again until 91%, chapter 53. Um, and it's after she's had her own realization about like she needs to like take care of herself and start over, right? So she's giving everything up. Um she stands up to this woman who has been a thorn in her side. And
That
I
such a
wrote down the
story.
yeah. I wrote down the line like, I'm done being mad and sad. It's just money. And then we click to 6 months later, right? So Pam has this, wonderful emotional arc where she realizes like I can find my own happiness basically, which is lovely. But the entire confrontational scene is Hector and Padma, and
Mhm.
it's related to Pam and Hank, but Pam is not the one doing the confronting, which like classically should not work. But I would argue that like in terms of reader enjoyment, I was very entertained. So
Oh yeah. I think,
yeah,
because we are on, I think an interesting thing and is like we should not like Hector as much as we do, right?
no,
Because
we love
Hector is
Hector.
not exact. Hector is great. We do love Hector. He loves his wife so much and he's so sweet. And but he's a hitman and he's
Yeah,
also playing our both of our sets of wives and husbands against each other. And I think the only one of the only things that redeems him in that specific way. There's lots of things that redeem him, but one of
yeah,
the specific things, like I'm looking out for us, you and me, Brenda, who we meet, and we don't get her POV, but we see her quite frequently in Hector's
yeah,
chapters. She's awesome, and he loves her so much, and he ends up in the climactic scene because he goes to save Elmer, and he's like nothing's
yeah,
happening to Elmer because you know why, like he also cares that he wouldn't want the dog to get hurt, but also Brenda's an animal lover and does animal rescue, and he's like, I would never, like, she would be so upset if anything happened to Elmer. I will not let anything happen to this dog. And you're like, oh, Hector, we love you even though you're there to kill everybody.
yeah, yeah. And he's a scary dude, but because, I mean, this is such a good example of interiority. And I think this story would not have worked as well if we didn't have Hector's POV. It would have felt far more like frightening, right? Like we have
Yeah.
wives who want to kill their husbands and they hire a hitman, and then we have husbands who think that the hitman's trying to kill them because they don't have the money. And, like there's a lot of tension there that's beautiful, beautiful MTS tension. But it becomes rompy because we have Hector's POV and we're on his side. We're like, yeah, Hector, like do the right thing and like get the dog. And like we totally get where you're coming from because you're an operator, like you're gonna take payment. And he like when they find out that he's double dipping, he's like, yeah, I was double dipping. Are you kidding? Like, of course I was.
Yeah, why would you expect me to do any different?
Right. But we understand how he's translating everything around him, and so we are very much on his side as well.
Yeah. And
And
he does have a lovely contrast to Hector
yeah,
Fareed, who is truly the heartless hitman kind of guy.
yes.
Like we find out that Hector has done his research because Hector is a thorough guy and found out like some nasty things about Fareed.
Mhm.
And so it sets him up to not like Fareed right away. And then he like, gives I think he gives Brenda a side eye at some point too. And he's like, hey, don't be looking at my wife that way. And then you
Right.
done at a dog, like forget it, you're done.
Yeah.
We don't like
Yeah.
Fareed either. He's a total asshole.
No,
across the
Freed's a
board.
great villain.
He's rude.
Yeah.
Yes, he is a great villain.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're on Hector's side, and it's. I also agree with you that if we didn't have his POV, it wouldn't be because we wouldn't necessarily fully get the all the misdirection that's happening
Yeah.
because Hector, he doesn't necessarily do anything to clear up these misdirections. You know, he is 100% playing for number one, which we knew right up front that's what he was going to do, and we see him figuring out like how can I manipulate this situation to make it work best for me and Brenda. And so we get that perspective on it too, which makes it even more fun because it's like, well, we know what's going on and we see him withholding from various people pieces of information that we already know. And so we get the delight of the manipulation that we see is happening with him too. So
Yeah. Very, very well said. Very well said. And I was just realizing Hector doesn't really have an emotional arc. His story change
mm,
is, he leaves the hitman life and decides to go open up this animal shelter with his wife, which was like, I can stop doing this evil stuff. I mean, that is an emotional arc.
I thought I had an emotional arc for
Did you?
everybody.
Okay.
Um, Yeah, no, I'm trying to find his because I had like you. I totally agreed with you on Pam's. Padma had one as well, which I think we both.
Padma
agreed
had a nice one. She self-actualizes too. She realizes that she doesn't have to be under her mother's thumb and can be the woman she wants to be, which is amazing for
That's
her.
fantastic.
But
Yes,
she's also, she's not the most likable character. But
she's not.
we enjoy her. And she also, given that Hank has this assumption that Padma is out to get him, right? And it's like it's all tied up to the poker chip that he found on Dave and like he took away from it and like all of that gets wrapped up and like, it's really a final twist. And we learn how Dave
What really happened to Dave?
what really happened to Dave.
Postscript.
Yeah, and it turns out he tripped and his wife was right, like he
Yep.
tripped. He found the chip and he was like, oh, and then fell and then the garage door chops his head off or
And
whatever it is.
the axe that he was holding, which Hank had interpreted
Right.
to be like he fought back. It's like he was like like these guys came after him and he's holding this axe. It was like no, he had gone to
No, he
get the
tripped.
axe for Andre so that Andre could cut down the
Can
damn tree
chop
with the
down the
bush.
tree. Yeah. So this is an example of like very well placed assumptions that all have logical reasons for being assumed. And then the twist is when we realize what actually happened. It's like the reveal of what actually happened is what makes it twisty. And there's a lot going on here.
Mhm.
There was a lot to keep track of, and the different POVs I think serve the story beautifully. Where I'm going to just assume that Hector also had an emotional arc. I can't remember what it was, but if
I
you found
thought I
it,
had
then
labeled everybody. The reason I'm looking over here is this is where my notes are, and I had labeled everybody else's, and now I can't find Hector. So maybe I didn't. Like I found
okay.
one for Hank. I definitely found one for Padma and for Pam, like we talked about. Um, so yeah,
But I mean, he does have a change. He leaves the hitman life,
yeah.
right? And they decide to go and live their dreams and open up this animal shelter in, gosh, I forgot the country that they moved
It's in El
to.
Salvador.
El Salvador.
Yeah, which is
Yeah,
where he is from.
right.
As a
So
matter
that
of fact, they
is,
had said that I can't remember, or maybe I wasn't sure, but he had said like when the guys were getting ready to leave, he's like, "Why are you still at my mom's house?" And they're like, "Wait, you mean we can leave?" But he had said like, "Wait, didn't you guys were talking about like an investment opportunity
yeah.
that you had?" And then 6 months, cut to 6 months later, we're at this resort, and I think that was maybe their investment opportunity was to buy this resort.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, because they are under the assumption that they can't go back to their wives because their
Right.
wives were going to have them killed, right? So everyone is assumed that we can't end up together, and of course they end up together in the end. It's a
Happy.
nice happy ever after, but with a lot more understanding about like what the problems were that we never discussed, in each couple.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know. I'm just looking at the notes of like what we wanted to talk about here. And I love how many misunderstandings there are here. Like we have maximized the number of misunderstandings that can happen. And to your point earlier about like the reader knows what's actually going on, there's some stuff that we didn't predict. Like I remember thinking like, oh my God, she actually killed off the husbands. Like that's what a choice, right?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
this is half the book and then of course they do not, but I had like a good 10% where I was like, whoa, like
Yeah.
wow, what's going to happen now, you know? And
Yeah,
then,
she teased it out about as long as she could without it us being, I think then you'd start to question, like, well, why did we have so much of Hank's POV if he's actually
yeah.
dead? But so she kept it going right up to the moment where it was just like, okay, yeah, now I need to reveal this to the audience
Right,
again.
right. And then it was like another 10 to 15% before the women, the wives figure out that the men are alive through the email. Larry's checking his email and they see it change. And so they're like, oh my God, and so, but the assumption there is not like, oh, thank God they're alive. It's like that, but also like they left us on purpose. They faked their deaths to get away from our marriages and canceled the life insurance policies, which just feels like a big, like, screw you. And so another assumption, right? And then we
Mhm.
flip to Hanks and we learn that the husbands are actually like, oh God, what did we do? Like we're assholes. So they all have their emotional arcs, but then they're like mad that their wives were going to kill them, but they also understand why. And like there's just it's maximum misassumption and it's incredible.
And the reveals of certain pieces of information to the interested parties, like, we could have had a reveal of the insurance thing probably at any point, but I feel like she timed it so perfectly.
Yeah.
Like, oh God, our husbands are dead. Oh no, like now we feel really, really bad that like this happened and we were going back on it and we didn't want it to happen. But wait a minute, they canceled their insurance policies? These assholes. And then like the husbands with like finding out like, oh, they know you're alive and like, oh, but they're the ones who tried to kill you. Like those kinds of moments where you're revealing different pieces of information to the different peoples to have them show their reactions. She really took advantage of like drawing that out and timing
Yeah.
those reveals perfectly so you could get the maximum sort of impact of each of those pieces of information on the characters, and then we get to watch that unfold. I'm like,
Right.
oh wait, maybe everything's gonna be, oh nope, now there's another wrinkle here. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's well done.
And, going back to the story question of will they get their money, which I think is kind of where we landed. Like, will we have a retirement plan? The answer is no.
Nope.
Right? And so the money ended up with Hector and ultimately ended up with all of them, but not in the way we expect. It's like they co-own this business and, we don't know whether the wives are going to stay with them. We kind of assume they are because they're reconnected, but like the retirement plan does not look like what any of them thought.
Right.
The wives all figure out new versions of their lives and have self-actualized.
Mhm.
And the husbands have found a new version of their life where they're satisfied too and like working hard and building this business and like they didn't get the easy out. They didn't get away with swindling the casino out of $9 million. But then Hector has the money and it does affect all of them, And like I think that the whole thing about like we need the 9 million to be able to save us, like Pam says to Hank through Hector, you have to give up the money or we're gonna die. And so of course Hector does it because there is love there. But then Hector like figures out how to take it from everyone. Like that in itself is a twist, right? Because we're assuming that like the mob is going to get away with the money and no one will have the money.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it just, twists are just assumptions proved wrong, but the number of assumptions that are logical in this story was like 10 out of 10. Like it worked really, really well.
Yep. Yeah. Used all very brilliantly to maximum effect.
Yeah.
Um, and I
Yeah.
think like they end up in a place where they don't expect to be, but throughout, Hector is also in some ways sort of like our wise man who's like floating through and making everyone sort of see what they need to see. And he keeps saying
Hmm.
like happy wife, happy life.
Yeah.
And there's also like in the same vein of that, it's just like when Pam has her emotional aha, and it's like, hey, I've still got my family, meaning my
Yeah.
daughter and my grandchild who's on the way, and all my friends, and like that's really what I need. I don't need the money. So there is this theme of like, yeah, they all ended up not having the money that they
Right.
really wanted and thought would save them, but they've come back around to all the friends are still friends and they've got this, all their found family and real family all back together again, we assume.
Yeah.
Because even everybody, even Shalisa and Andre seem like they're maybe gonna give it another shot, which
Yeah.
as long as he doesn't tell her what to eat is great.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I
It
think he's
just,
over it. He did leave her a cupcake back in
he did.
the juniper bush. So
He did. And then, the Padma POV also we didn't you could have gotten away, I think, that with the story without the Padma POV, but again,
yeah.
it added to the romp aspect of it because we learned from Padma that she in no way has any idea what she's doing, nor is she after Hank. She doesn't even know about any of this. And everything that she's saying about her dating life, Hank is interpreting as like she's bringing hitman to come and kill us, so we have to fake our own death. Like he's taking an assumption about what he thinks he understands, taking action on it, going this way. And meanwhile, Padma's like, oh my God, I have to date these guys to make my mom happy. And also, yes, there is money stolen, but like, whatever, like, it doesn't really matter, you know?
It's more about like there's money stolen, that this is going to make me look really good that I figured it out. It's more
Exactly.
about her career advancement in like, because she wasn't there when all the money was stolen. She's only just
Right.
started and she's uncovered it. So yes, theoretically, like it is a bonus for her. Of
Yeah.
course her mom doesn't see it that way because her mom's awful.
Her mom is awful. Yeah.
Poor
And
Pat.
the missing poker chip, by the way, from that like thing on her desk is something that she dropped, Dave found, and then Dave was looking at it when he died. And so that like starts all of the assumptions about all of this. And so it makes me very curious, Sue Hincenbergs, if you ever watch this, we'd love to hear from you. Like, did you plot this out as meticulously as it ended up? Like, where did you land on like who knew what when, and like the what actually happened here is pretty simple actually, but like how did you get to like all of these misassumptions and create this delightful romp, because it is complex. There's a lot that went into this, and it is seen, and it is we appreciate you.
Well, I
um
think that it's a great example of sometimes, both work with writers who sometimes are just throwing lots of things at their
yeah,
plots because it feels like, oh, I need more. It's not twisty enough, or it's not doing enough. And we're like, no, no, no. Like you don't have to have super complicated to be super twisty. You can have a deceptively simple plot, but because you're pulling all these levers of misdirection and
yeah,
misunderstanding, it becomes really twisty, based off of something that is incredibly simple, which does not mean easy to pull off from a writer perspective,
yeah.
you
I
know?
mean, the nugget of this story is like, the late 90s classic Office Space of like, let's funnel a little bit each day.
Hmm.
And in doing so, over the course of 4 years, make a $10 million, $9 million nest egg.
Yep.
And then it's like, who will find out why, But like, I think to your point, it's not like making it twisty is all about misassumptions with this, like, logical assumptions that are wrong.
Yeah. And all of
Um,
these assumptions were completely logical. There's no point
yeah,
in which we go, oh, like she would never think that, or he would
no,
never think that. Everything worked out so smoothly. And it's like, well, of course she would think that. He
yeah,
would think that about the poker chip because he's going into this like knowing in the back of his mind there's this
they're
risk
gonna get
that they
caught.
could get caught. And
Yeah,
what's going to happen is the Indian hitmen are coming after them because they're, the casino's owned by the Indian mob boss lady who's notorious.
who's very scary,
Yeah,
very
very
scary
scary.
lady. Yeah.
So, yeah. Well done.
Well,
Well done,
well
Sue
done.
Hincenbergs.
Well
Thank
done, Sue
you.
Hincenberg. Yes. Thank you so much for writing this. Thank you.
Yep,
Maybe you'll see this, maybe you won't, but we really appreciated reading it and talking about it,
definitely.
and appreciate you writing this delightful romp of a story.
Indeed. Indeed.
All right. Well, thanks everyone who watches live or watches in the future. Again, we are Carrie and Sam from Shadows and Secrets, shadowsandsecrets.com. And if you're curious, look us up at shadowsandsecrets.com, reach out, and thank you for watching. We
Yeah,
appreciate
we'll
you.
see you next time.
Yeah.
Bye.